Howdy everyone, and welcome back to The More You Grow. I made it back home to my hometown in North Texas. Let me just say it is great to be home. Finally get to relax a little bit. Been just kind of taking it easy, but we can't be taking it easy too long. We've got things to do. And one of the things I did when I was relaxing is I came out here in the backyard and just enjoyed the evenings. And while I was back here, I heard a distinct sound. The hummingbirds are back and they're looking for food. If you don't know what a hummingbird sounds like, take a look at this video that I took last year when I was putting up hummingbird feeders. Isn't that awesome? I love the sounds that hummingbirds make, and now that you know what they sound like, I guarantee you're going to be like me and hear them all the time. Everybody's going to think you're amazing because you can hear hummingbirds. But now that we know that hummingbirds are back, the thing we need to do now is get the feeders out. We've got our feeders here. I'm going to go through a checklist of things you need to do when you're putting your feeders up. I'm going to show you my recipe for a cheap, easy to make, and healthy hummingbird food that your hummingbirds will love. And then we'll talk about what to do as far as maintaining your hummingbird feeder and your hummingbird feed. So let's go check it out. Alright, step one, we need to do a check of our hummingbird feeders. I store my hummingbird feeders in the garage during the winter, and I highly recommend for y'all to do something similar, whether that be store it in an attic, a shed, an extra bedroom in your garage. The reason why I say to do that is if you leave your hummingbird feeders outdoors year-round, you're going to significantly decrease the use life of your hummingbird feeder. The plastic is going to start rotting. If you have a glass hummingbird feeder like I have here, you run the risk of breaking the glass when it freezes, or it could fall in a windstorm, things like that. So just by storing your hummingbird feeders when you're not using them somewhere that is protected, you're going to significantly increase the life of your feeder. And speaking of glass hummingbird feeders, I highly recommend for y'all to start off with a good quality hummingbird feeder rather than the cheap ones. These will last a lot longer, they're easier to clean, and they just look nicer. I would say if you're really serious about feeding the hummingbirds, just get a good quality feeder and be done with it. Instead of getting the cheap plastic ones that you have to buy year after year, they usually only last one season, you have to throw them away, buy a new one. A feeder like this will last you many years if you care for it properly. And speaking of that, what we need to do now is we need to make sure that the hummingbird feeder is all cleaned up, ready to go. I was just cleaning a little bit of the dust off here a minute ago, so just make sure to clean the dust off. And you want to take off the base of your hummingbird feeder here, and you want to make sure to wash it really well. Even though at the end of the season, I can't stress enough, you need to clean out your hummingbird feeders before you store them. If you don't, you're going to end up with a sticky mess that's going to have all the ports clogged up, and you're going to have bugs in it. So be sure to always clean your feeder out before you store it. But even though we cleaned it, we want to be sure to give this a nice clean wash. I'm going to get a little bit of soap and water and go in here, wash it out really well, rinse it out really well. You don't want any soap residue in there. And you want to make sure when you're cleaning it out, all the ports are coming out, clean water, and there's no clogs, anything like that. You don't want to have little bugs getting in there, things like that. So once you get it all cleaned up and ready to go, you're ready to fill it up with your hummingbird feed. So let me take you inside and show you the recipe I have for some cheap, easy, and very healthy hummingbird food that your hummingbirds will love. So let's get started making our hummingbird food. The recipe I use for my hummingbird food is a ratio of 1 to 4. So in this case, we're going to do 1 cup of sugar to 4 cups of water. I've already got 2 cups of water in the pot, and we're going to go ahead and add another 2 cups of water. And I've got a cup of sugar here, maybe a little bit more, because I like to give my hummingbird just a little bit more, but not too much. And we got 1 cup of sugar. So now we're going to bring this up to a boil. We're just trying to pasteurize this a little bit because we don't want this turning into a big bacteria mess if we didn't boil this up, and it helps it dissolve a little bit better. So now we're going to boil this up, and I'll get back to y'all in just a little bit. Okay, so we got our hummingbird food up to a good rolling boil. I wouldn't say you have to leave it there long. Just as long as you get it up to a good boil, we'll call it good. But at this point, there may be some out there that would say that this is a good time to add some red food dye or red food coloring, but let me stop you there. There's actually no need in doing that. There's enough red on these hummingbird feeders that you don't have to add any red dye to the food itself. There's going to be enough on here that they can figure it out. They're smart birds. And if your feeder doesn't have enough red on it, or if you think it needs a little bit more, you can always add some red ribbons, red tape, anything like that. Red works. It doesn't have to be in the food. And there may be some out there that say that the red dye is actually not good for the birds. I'm not an expert on that, but I just say that if you don't need to add it, don't. Just make it simple, make it easy, and if there's a potential that red dye could be hurting the birds, I'm not going to add it in there. There's enough red on these feeders that it's going to do the job. So we're going to let this cool off now to where we can put it in the feeders. I'll talk about storing your food and when to change the food depending on the temperatures and other conditions of where you live. Wow, it looks like I'm packing moonshine over here, but anyways, I've got the hummingbird food all cooled off. I got it put in a nice glass jar. I like to put my hummingbird food in glass jars because I feel like they stay cleaner a little bit better than plastic, and maybe something I'm just making up in my head. I don't know. I like glass jars. Don't knock me on it. So I've got this ready to go now. We'll put some of this in our hummingbird feeder in just a second. But what you don't use in your hummingbird feeder right away, you can store in the refrigerator for up to 2 weeks. That's why I like to make a bigger batch of a quart or 2 quarts and put it in the fridge, because here where I live it gets hot and I have to change the hummingbird feed out pretty regularly to keep it from going bad or getting any mildew, things like that in it. And so I like to keep some in the fridge where I can easily just add a little bit, clean it out, add some more, things like that. And speaking of changing out the hummingbird food, let's talk about how often you should change out your hummingbird food depending on the time of the year and where you live. Alright, so we've got our hummingbird food in our hummingbird feeder, and you may be wondering, why don't I have it filled all the way to the top? Well, there's a very good reason why I don't fill my hummingbird feeders up all the way. I like to replace my food pretty often, and if I fill this all the way up, you're just wasting a lot of hummingbird food. And so I would suggest just to put a little bit in there and replace it often. I say that if the temperature is above 90 degrees, I replace my food every day. And if it's in the 80s, the low 80s, I will replace it maybe every other day. If it's in the 70s, maybe every 3 days. And the reason why I replace it that often, if you just leave your hummingbird food sitting for too long, you're going to end up with bacteria. You end up with mold, fungus growing in your hummingbird food, and that's very unhealthy for the hummingbirds. So I would say just to put a little bit in your feeder and replace it every day, every other day, rather than filling it up to the top and waiting till it's empty. You're just going to end up with a nasty mess in here. So now that we've got that done, we just have to hang up our hummingbird feeder and wait for the little guys to show up. So let's get to it. Alrighty guys, we got our hummingbird food up and ready to go. If you want to find out how to attract more hummingbirds to your yard, check out the video I did a while back. I share with you all the tips and tricks that I learned over the years on how to draw in more hummingbirds to your feeder and to your yard. I'll leave a link for that up above and down in the description. Until then, if you like this video, be sure to hit that like button. If you have any more questions for me on making your own hummingbird food or anything hummingbird related, leave it down in the comments and I'll do my best to answer those. And if you haven't done so yet, be sure to subscribe to the channel and go check us out on Facebook and Instagram. And until next time, I hope you'll join me right here on The More You Grow.